Yesterday I listened to Tim Ferriss's podcast with Dave Camarillo, and he was talking about jiu-jitsu and kind of strategy for jiu-jitsu. And some of the things that he was speaking about were very similar to my approach to basketball, both offensively and defensively. So especially my Saba philosophy, and he even used the words advantage and neutral. And so especially from a defensive standpoint, my goal is to always keep the game in neutral. And so one of the things that Camarillo spoke about was being able to control the scrambles or control the transitions. That is the time, when you're going from an advantage to a disadvantage or potentially a disadvantage to an advantage, or there's nobody clearly has, an advantageous position and you're scrambling trying to get to that advantage. And in basketball, to me, the biggest thing that we need to control from a defensive standpoint is transition. If we can always force the defense, if we can always force the offense to play 5-on-5, our defense is going to be effective, regardless of how we play defensively, whatever schemes that we have. But if we can force them to go against 5 defensive players on each possession, we will have much more success than if it's constantly in a scramble situation where they have an advantage. I use that idea of when I'm structuring a defense or teaching defense, is our first goal is to get to a neutral position. That we want to take away their initial advantage in transition. We want to get to neutral, and from that neutral position, then it depends on what the personnel that we have and what our philosophy is, whether we're going to attempt to stay neutral, keep the ball in front of us, make them make tough shots, or maybe are we going to put some pressure on them, trapping, so on and so forth, denying passes hard, trapping on penetration, or when the ball gets to certain areas, to try to create a disadvantage situation, or a defensive advantage. So that's going to be dependent on personnel philosophy. But regardless of personnel philosophy, I always want us to get to that neutral position from a defense and to take away the initial offensive advantage that they have in transition. I was reading a little bit about tactical periodization, planning my lectures last week for my strength and conditioning class, and they talk about the 4 phases of the game, offense and defense, and then offensive transition and defensive transition. And basketball is obviously the same. And to me, if you can control that offensive and defensive transition period, it makes the half-court defense and the half-court offense much easier and likely much more successful. If you always play offense with an advantage or starting with an advantage in transition, you're likely to be more successful. And defensively, if you're able to take away that initial advantage that the offense has, you're more likely to be successful because you're forcing them to have to execute against a set defense in a 5-on-5 situation, as opposed to a scramble situation where they may have a numbers advantage, or at least a defense that isn't set and ready to help each other. My goal defensively, get it to neutral, take away the offense's advantage in transition or scramble type situations, and then from there, when we build out, that's going to be dependent on personnel and philosophy from team to team.